So this is session 3 of After Christmas. As the church spread into the non-Jewish areas and to Gentile people, the difficulties for Christians increased. The people of these different areas had their own gods, and although they might have differed from place to place, there was one thing that was common amongst them, and that was they believed it was important to placate the gods. And so they'd do this by worshipping them and by offering offerings to them, making sacrifices and so on, because it was important to do that so that the gods would then give them good crops and good health and so on. Paul ran into a big problem in Ephesus. There was a huge temple there to the god Artemis, and in fact this was a place of pilgrimage for many people, and so Ephesus became very wealthy because of Artemis, especially for those who were silversmiths who used to make little statues of Artemis to sell to these pilgrims. And so one particular one by the name of Demetrius called his fellow workers together, and he says this: "You know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business, and you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all, and there's a danger of not only losing our trade, but also our good name. And the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped through all the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty." The outcome of that was that a riot started, and Paul and Barnabas had to leave the area. In Rome, Christians would refuse to make sacrifice to the emperor or regard him as a god or worship any of the other gods. And because of this, they were seen not just as traitors, but they were seen as the cause of disasters. Because they weren't pleasing the gods, then disasters would come upon Rome. So they were seen as traitors. Now, in both these cases, it wasn't actually the officials who did the persecuting. It was more that the general population, because they didn't like the Christians and believed they were causing their problems, that they would bring lawsuits against them. And quite often it was the magistrates or the local people in charge who would say to them, "No, this isn't true." And this is what happened in Paul's case. The riot was stopped by the local leader coming and saying, "Look, Paul and Barnabas have done nothing wrong. They haven't robbed the temple. They haven't blasphemed Artemis." And so he quietened the riot down. So it wasn't as if it was a sort of a state-run persecution. It was more the local people who didn't like the Christians. The other thing that was probably galling to the local people was that many of the people who were converted were slaves, and they were being treated as equals with the other people that were their converts. And the general population didn't like that because they saw slaves as inferior beings. So Christians were not popular in pagan society. They were seen as upsetting the status quo. They were seen as causing trouble, causing disaster. In fact, many of them blamed the fire that burned a lot of Rome on the Christians who wouldn't worship the emperor. And so Christians needed to come together very much for support, not just for fellowship, but for support of one another and to care for one another. That's what gave them the strength that they needed. Being a Christian today is not about being popular. It's not about being acceptable. Certainly we need to be loving and caring to everybody, but we don't water down our principles or our beliefs simply so that we can become acceptable in society.
Sinful desire in me into holy paradise. faithful